Hello, everybody. How's it going today? Thank you for joining us. The local time is 1:46 p.m. Pacific time, and we will begin this live stream, session A, at the top of the hour at 2 o'clock local time. So, to remind you, if you are veterans of these live streams, and to inform you, in case you are new, this is live, and for the next 14 minutes, I'm going to be saying hi to people and just kind of doing some chit-chat, basically, about the weather and God knows what, just to make sure that we're functional. And yes, this is the first time I've done this in 9 months, so I'm a little extra antsy to make sure that everything's working properly. But if you're watching this as a replay, you can, of course, scrub ahead or fast forward 14 minutes to the beginning of the actual program. So thanks for joining us today. Are we 5 by 5? Amen. Okay. Wonderful. Looks like we're 5 by 5. Let me slow down the chat and say hi to a few folks. Let me just scroll back just so I can read, because it looks like a bunch of you are here already. Hello, Elaine in Tucson, and geologically speaking, so I think, are you still down in Baja right now, Todd? That is commitment. To be properly placed for a Baja BC series, Todd, watching us from some cushy beach in Baja, wonderful. Thank you, Todd. Geologically speaking on Instagram. Highly recommended. Mike, hello. Skip, Cindy, I'm back a ways. Daryl from Kansas. Cindy from Waldport, Oregon. Pam from the snowy Bitterroot. Yeah, it's like barely over freezing here. It's steel gray skies. It's one of those bone-chilling days here in Ellensburg. Occasional little spits of snowflakes, but man, it is cold out there. Just feels extra raw. Hello, Myra from Quesnel up in BC. So so far we've got Todd down in Baja. We got Myra up in BC. Baja BC, god dang. Say hi to a few more, and then I'm going to email our guest. And you've noticed already possibly that I'm not being coy this year. This winter, we're going to actually say who the guest is. We're not going to be coy about it, or we're not going to be guessing the guest. So Linda Noson, you should meet, and I've met her just recently. And so, before I forget, let me just do that. Okay, so I'm going to, give me just a second, would you please? Talk amongst yourselves. Come down to live. How many do we have? 348 who are here more than 12 minutes early. Brownie points for you guys. Okay, let me concentrate for a second. Add the guest. Copy the link. Go to the email. That's Linda's email. Paste. I'm sending from my Gmail to Linda's Gmail. Send. That wasn't so hard, was it, boy? All right. While I'm at it, let me make sure that this YouTube window is muted. It is. Get rid of the Invite Guest tab. Let's say hi to some more. I think I'm live now. So there's Teza. Teza reports, wow, the numbers are ramping up. Moto Mining is having a little fun with me right now. This is only a test. This is real, Moto. This is real now. Come on. And Moto's maybe been part of these tests. I've been testing this equipment almost every day for the last 3-4 days. And some are like, oh my God, seriously. Hey, Linda, you're here already. Wonderful. You can just kind of stay there. I'm glad that worked. So relax, Linda. Thank you. It looks like we're functional there. I can stop thinking about that email going through. Yeah, let's just some hellos here. Don in Los Angeles, you're a regular, Don. Howdy. Gillian's in Pasco, Washington. Rachel, okay. Yeah, this is real this time. Phil is in, you might retype your name in if I missed you before. Rick is in Costa Rica. Hi, Rick. That sounds nice about right now. Gene is in Minocqua, Wisconsin. Bo, good afternoon, Nick. Ebeluk, Denmark. Thank you for identifying your flag this time. Yeah, we got more than 400 now, 425. Wow, come on, man. We're getting the band back together. Luke is in Quebec City. Mark is in South Wales, Australia. Crown House in Vienna, Austria. Wonderful to see everybody again. Kirk is in Sweden. I'm missing a bunch of names. We're scrolling very quickly now, but I'm grabbing what I can. Jake is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Kirk in Philomath. Notice I'm still using this, Kirk, but we're enjoying your mugs at home. Vincent's in Montreal. Garrett, the Dutch Night Owl from the Netherlands. I'm halfway through Norley's movie, her 90-minute movie. I'm halfway through. I started losing it a little bit, so I had to hit pause just as she was losing it. So looking forward to watching the rest of that. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Danny, Happy Valley. Carol's in Florida. Hello. Nice to see people from all over the place. Lyle, hello. Geneva from Cologne, Germany. It's almost 11 p.m. there, and it's almost 2 p.m. here. So according to my math, Geneva, you're nine hours ahead. See how quick I am? Halifax, Nova Scotia. Hi, Michael. Adventure Sombrada. I met you this past summer from Waikele, Hawaii. Mark's in Salt Lake City. Okay, so people are continuing to pour in. We have almost 500 live viewers, and we have another 8 minutes to go before the show begins. I guess, let me describe my setup. Just you know, I don't know. I guess I'll just feel better if I share my new setup. Most of you have not been part of these live testing things that I've been doing the last few days. So I'm hoping if you are a loyal kind of veteran viewer of these live streams, there are some things that are familiar. Of course, that thing's familiar. That's the old greenie, and the other two green chalkboards, same thing. Peter in physics shored things up. This thing was getting really wobbly, so a few months ago he glued and he nailed and screwed and everything to get things from falling apart because it was almost ready to collapse. This, you might recall, is from my mother, and that's been with us since the backyard days. The Mova Globe, M-O-V-A. They're pricey, but think of my mom, of course, every time we have that. And then I chose this. I think I'll have this every time. This is from Cozy Fort by Steve, if my memory serves me correctly. I hope I didn't screw that up. Again, back from the backyard COVID pandemic live streams, whatever you want to call them. So I thought that I would, there were plenty of other gifts as well, but those two I thought looked kind of nice. So we'll see. Maybe I'll rotate things around. We have a little bit of ribbon candy in case we need it. I mean, it's almost like I'm stalling now, but I do. I need to, in case I have a problem. Okay, quit screwing around, talking to myself. Let's make sure that I'm going to try one thing. We haven't started yet. I'm going to try one thing. So here's the new setup. Where there, okay, there's a delay on this iPad. So I'm talking to face camera, and we will be going to the website. Yeah, there's a delay on the iPad. Okay, I can handle that. All right, so that's working. I mean, I'm not going to be testing everything every day, but again, there's a lot to keep track of, and before we start, I can thank Nat Nickel one more time, who did me a major solid, did all of us a major solid to set all this stuff up. And I've been playing with it so often, so frequently, in the last 6 weeks that I feel actually pretty comfortable. Can't believe it. Okay, we'll say hi to a few more, and then I have to take a few moments. We have about 4 minutes before we start. I'll need to get my head right and mumble to myself a little bit. That's also something. Yeah, Vindman's Bakery is continuing. This episode brought to you by Vindman's Bakery in downtown Ellensburg. You gotta love it. No Vindman's today, but Jeff has been very generous with the other series that is happening in this room. And there will be a talk this Friday at noon. I guess I'll plug that right now. You want to come back? Not the chalkboard now, but Joel Gombiner from University of Washington. I'll be broadcasting his talk live this Friday at high noon Pacific. He'll be talking about mega floods in Moses Coulee. Ice Age floods talk. I think you might enjoy it. Hi, Joe in Jacksonville, Oregon. Den is in the Jurassic Coast, Dorset, UK. Malcolm, Mark, Phil in Mankato, Minnesota. Hello, Rachel. Carla says hello, everybody. Albany, New York. Ephrata, Washington. Honey Greg in East Tennessee. Sacramento. Hi, Jennifer in Boise. Good to see you again. John Plong, you're a regular. Granite Falls, Minnesota. Camas, Washington. Bon Blue, hello. Sauber, okay, you're with us. Where are you, Sauber? You're on the road someplace, I'm sure. Oh, Quartzsite, Arizona. Anticipated my question. Peters in Calgary, Alberta. Okay, I got 3 minutes. We have 600 people. And it's time for me to take a couple moments and just get my head right. So here's to you for joining us today. Thank you so much. And we'll begin the program in 2 minutes. Hot mic. Hot mic. Okay. Now, you don't have to shout. You have a microphone, just 2.5 buttons down. You're not speaking to a large room. That's what you've been doing the entire quarter, boy, but you don't have to. There's nobody in the room. Have you noticed? It's just you. You don't have to yell. In fact, I think you were just yelling because you were excited. So lower that voice. You can be even right here. You can be right here with this volume, and they're going to be able to hear you. Calm yourself down. You don't have to be so damn loud. You can be elevated in energy, but you don't have to be screaming. Okay? Now, this is session A. You do not have to do the whole alphabet in one show, right? We're just setting the tone today. We're not heavy with the data today. We're not heavy with the nuts and bolts. Do what you want to do with the chalkboard and the laptop, and then get to your guest. We want to hear from our guest today. This is not about you. This is about your guest. Set her up. Keep it moving. Yep. It's been 9 months since you've done this, but it feels familiar. It's just like getting on the horse again. It feels familiar. Don't be all weirded out. It's just the same thing. You've done this a lot now. You know what you're doing. They're tuning in because they know who you are. They're tuning in because they just want you to do the same thing you've done before, the same kind of style. Just they're not your enemies, they're your friends. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Session A of a live stream series called Baja BC. Thank you for joining us. I am your host, Nick Zentner, and I teach geology in this room every morning at 10 o'clock. And it has been delightful to be back to normal, It's been delightful to have a room full of students, and I have a particularly enthusiastic group of 75 young people who are just very exciting to be with. They're just exciting to be with. This is different. I'm in the same room, but there's nobody in this room except you and me. Really just technically me, but I think you know what I mean. So I don't have to scream, I don't have to fill, I don't have to do cheerleading and calisthenics, I don't think. This is a more intimate thing. But I do think that I want to talk briefly about who I am, and that's not something I typically do. However, many of you, I think, are new to the YouTube channel. Things have been growing and growing, and so many of you have not been part of these live streams before, and you don't have a good sense of who I am. Others of you do, but I can remind you of who I am. And I think that's important with this Baja BC series because I have to be careful about who I am and what I'm trying to do here. And if I'm not clear about who I am and what I'm trying to do with this winter's live stream series, I think some narratives might be developed on your end that are inaccurate. And I hope it'll be clear what I mean in just a second. But before I forget, this is a series of 26 live streams. You know, in our language, there's 26 letters in the alphabet. That's the gimmick. So we're going to have 26 of these shows. Here's the schedule for the first handful of letters. And we have a Thanksgiving holiday here in the States. So here we are, Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific time for session A. I will see you next Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific for session B with Darrell Cowan, University of Washington, C, D, E, F, G, and so on. So there'll be 26 of these, and that will get us to mid-February, I guess. But if you're confused about the letters, like what's the letters about? What's the alphabet? I don't get it. Well, it's my gimmick. I came up with an idea that I wanted to have a class, quote unquote, that's free and open to anyone who's interested. You didn't pay anything, right, to be here. I do it for fun, mostly, but I also just do it to learn new things. And we're learning together, essentially. So the alphabet series is, I'm going to assume if you're watching session C, you've seen A and B. I think that's fair. And you don't all have to watch them live, of course. We all have busy lives, but we want to build through the alphabet. And I don't expect most of you to have seen all the stuff I've done before, but this particular Baja BC A to Z series will stand as a unit, and I hope that you'll be with us the whole winter. Who knows? We'll see if maybe you'll get too detailed, too whatever, and you'll just be turned off. But I will use the model that we've had the last couple of winters, which I think did work. Let me go to the geologic time stick. Try that again. Let me go to the geologic time stick. This is a prop I've used for a couple of years, Precambrian, Paleozoic, Mesozoic, Cenozoic. And 2 winters ago, when we were in the heart of the lockdown, still, the pandemic, I was broadcasting from my backyard into an iPhone, and we were looking at exotic terrains that were accreted to the western edge of North America between 200 and 50 million years ago. That was our magic time window 2 years ago. Those all still exist on the YouTube channel if you're interested. They're called Exotic Terrains A to Z. It's the first time I tried one of these alphabet things. Then, last winter, in this room, instead of my backyard, for reasons that whatever, we were confined to the Eocene. And we did an alphabet series on that crazy Eocene, A to Z. And most of our discussions involved 60 to 40 million years ago. That's the Eocene epoch. But if you recall, if you were with us, we were into some Cretaceous stuff even then, couldn't hold it. Verbally, I'll tell you that this winter, we will mostly be between 85 and 55 million years ago. That's Baja BC time. I haven't even inked it in yet. 85 to 55, Baja BC. But I have questions about those dates. Why does it have to be 85? Why does it have to be 55? And you're like, wait a minute, you've got questions? I thought you were the guy teaching the class. Oh, that's what this is. We're learning together. I don't even know who's going to be on letter E or what the topic will be. And you're like, you don't? You're starting this thing and you don't even have it all mapped out? No, and I think I'm doing that on purpose. And that's what we've done the last couple of winters as well. This is something we're doing together. And based on what the live guests say, based on emails I get from geologists, based on emails I get from you, the viewers, based on comments I see in the live chat when I watch the replay, based on comments you leave below after the fact, that's all input. That's all this kind of collective, inclusive discussion, and we learn together. That's what this is about. It's different than a normal lecture thing where the guy or the gal up in front is lecturing at everybody in the room. That's not what this is. Okay, I've avoided talking about me, but let me try it real quick. I've been teaching here 30 years. And for the first 15 years, so that's the early 90s until the late 2000s or something, mid 2000s, it was a traditional job. I chose to do the traditional things. Teach every day in the classroom, Geology 101, Geology 351, teach in the field course down in Eastern California. No cameras, nothing, just me and the students. And that daily repetition allowed me to practice my teaching abilities. And I am different than most people in a university setting where I stopped at a master's degree. I do not have a PhD. I do not have tenure. I do not have a research program. I don't serve on university committees. I'm a weird guy in this world. And I have chosen to be at a university setting. And thankfully, this university has continued to employ me, even though I'm not doing conventional stuff. So even back then, when I was doing traditional teaching, it was just teaching and recruiting students into our program, and that was it. And not many other departments had that. But what I really want to say is that starting about 15 years ago, I knew that there was an audience off campus. Just from ranchers coming in and asking questions, people from all walks of life, people from all ages. I'm just talking about Central Washington now. People coming in and asking questions, bringing rocks in. Is this a meteorite? Is this gold? Is this an Ellensburg blue agate? I just knew because of where we lived that this stuff was inherently interesting to a lot of different kinds of people. Political spectrum, the whole thing. So I knew an audience was there. So 15 years ago, I started making videos. And I started to do public lectures. And then the public lectures became recorded. And so then suddenly there's a wider audience. And then public television. And so a lot of different forms of outreach. But the last thing I want to say about moi, that's French, is that in March of 2020, everything ground to a halt. You know that story. And I discovered the power of broadcasting live on YouTube. And if you are new to us and you're like, why are there 814 people here? This is the first show. Well, this isn't the first show. These 800 people have been loyal viewers and followers of this YouTube channel. And essentially, the YouTube channel did not exist in March of 2020. So however many followers there are or whatever, subscribers, I don't know. But it's a lot of people now. And I continue to be energized to do more of these kinds of things. Okay, that's the end of the me part, but let me put a real fine point on it. This thing here is controversial among geologists in the year 2022. And even that label, controversial, needs to be explained. And it will be explained over the next 3 or 4 letters, I think. But it's not a typical topic that you would select if you were trying to do something like this. And in fact, I was camping this summer with some geologists that I know, some that I don't know, and they're like, oh, what are you doing next? I heard you're doing these live streams. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do Baja BC this winter. And they're like, ooh, really? I'm like, yeah. And that reaction is like, one, why would you spend time on something that I don't even think is a thing? Or two, boy, I don't know. People got pretty torqued off at each other 20, 30 years ago. You're sure you want to get in the middle of all that? And the answer is yes, I do. Because right over there behind that wall is Mount Stewart. I live in the shadow of Mount Stewart. I see that mountain every day. And Mount Stewart, as you'll learn from our guest today, is the centerpiece of all of this. this business about Baja BC, this business about moving granite almost 2,000 miles north up the western margin of North America. So I live the closest of anybody to that mountain, and I want to get into this. Last introductory comment. I am conflict averse. I'm not a confrontational person. I do whatever I can just in my everyday life to avoid conflict. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but I don't enjoy it. And so because conflict and reputation and orneriness across the board has existed over the decades, I have no interest in recreating that here. And in fact, if some of our conversations with our guests goes in that direction, and he said, she said, and all that, I'm just gonna, I'm change the tone. We're just learning stuff together. That's it. We're just learning stuff together. That's it. And I'm a teacher. I'm not affiliated with any research group or my reputation. I'm not trying to convince anybody this is the real thing or not. Doesn't matter. Just want to learn some new things. Okay, very good. So that was a bit of freelancing, but a bit of on the time stick, and that is the plan. Let me check my notes. Freewheeling already. Out of the gate early. Yeah, I still like holding up stuff. So yeah, there we are in the backyard. Sure. This is a group. So I said I'm not part of a research group. Well, technically I am, but I'm not doing the research. I'm their public outreach people. So this is the dream team who we'll be talking about again a fair amount. I suppose we'll have all three of these on this winter again at some point. But the North Cascades continues to be in my sights. And if you're asking me, Baja BC needs to be elaborated upon if we're talking about the North Cascades. There's Baja BC, which I've shown to you in a number of forms over the years. You're like, slow down. I don't know what that means. We're not getting into the details of it today. We are a little bit. There's Mount Stewart, which I see every morning, just like this. Always a rosy sky. Not true, but just from our neighborhood, we can see Mount Stewart. And our question is, did that granite of Mount Stewart originate in Mexico? Okay, I want to do something with the chalkboard. And we have a fine-looking group here, so thank you for being with us. Let's do some basics of Baja BC, which have been presented in different forms over the last couple of years. The backyard and the crazy Eocene, we got into it a little bit, but I'm mostly now trying to set up our visit with Linda, the visit with our guest, which is coming probably at the bottom of the hour. I think I'm on schedule, Linda, so about 15 minutes I'll be coming to you. Okay, so let's try this. Scene change. I even have the fancy colored chalk for this momentous occasion. So to get us into the concept of Baja BC, let's first of all start with 3 rock units that I've been able to learn a fair amount. Terrible grammar. I've been interested in 3 bedrock units to the north of town, Mount Stewart granite being one of them. And we'll put that into context with Baja BC. Ready, go. So here's a cross section. Here's a superficial view. Let's put a big old thrust fault in here. And let's call that the Windy Pass Thrust. And there's videos from this past summer highlighting all these features. So in a way, I'm not starting from scratch with many of you if you've been watching these field videos. So I'm not going to write everything out because I feel like I've already kind of presented it in different forms, even in past live streams. So this is a thrust fault, the Windy Pass Thrust. What are the 2 units in the hanging wall and the footwall of the Windy Pass Thrust? Well, I can do that. I guess I will write this out. The Chewacam Schist, which was originally 120 million year old deep sea sediment. He goes to the handouts. This is from the backyard 2 years ago. Chewacam sediments originally were deep ocean sands, a perluminous, whatever that means, and we're in an ocean, okay? The bedrock, you don't even know where we are yet. Let me tell you right now. These are people walking around in a landscape, I'm pointing to it now, 30 miles to the north of Ellensburg, in the vicinity of Mount Stewart and the Stewart Range, near Leavenworth, near Stevens Pass, okay? In the North Cascades, just to the north of Ellensburg, Washington, these are the 3 bedrock units. I'm starting with the footwall of the Windy Pass thrust, and it's the Chewacam schist that originally was deep ocean mud. Right there, there's a story, isn't there? What the hell? We got stuff that was in the deep ocean, and now it's not in the deep ocean? What's up? Well, we take that mud and we start deforming it in some sort of accretionary wedge. This is the series of interpretations from people who've been working on the Chewacam schist over the years. None of my work. Remember, I'm the guy who's the kind of communicating this work. And before you're done, you have a Chewacam schist with 5 folding events and 3 metamorphic events. I probably should have said it backwards. The 3 metamorphic events are here with particular temperature and pressure conditions. We've got garnets nearby. I brought in a piece. I'm testing now the quality of this camera with okay, not bad, not bad. So here's Chewacam schist with some garnets within it, collected in the Icicle Canyon, upstream from Leavenworth, Washington. Okay? So that's our oceanic sediment that is now a metamorphic rock called the Chewacam schist. We good? Okay? What's in the hanging wall that got shoved up and onto that Chewacam schist? I'll color it green, even though that's redundant. We have a green chalkboard. Can you guess? I'll pause. Can you guess what the bedrock is? What kind of rock is this green stuff? And what's the name of the unit? Mark, you're good, Mark. Mark's the guy that took 92 pages worth of notes over in the UK and emailed them to me. Way to go, Mark. You got those notes drilled into your head. This is the Ingalls serpentinite. I'm leading to something, by the way. What am I doing? I'm talking about what Baja BC is, and I'm setting you up for it in a different way than I have done before. The Ingalls serpentinite has been dated, the best date we have is 162 million years ago. And you're like, well, that doesn't work. This is younger than this? I thought in the Grand Canyon, the oldest rocks are at the bottom and the youngest rocks are at the top. They are. That's the proper order. Oldest rocks at the bottom of a canyon, youngest at the top. But that's why we need a Windy Pass thrust, which was active between 100 and 96 million years ago. So in other words, we have the old Ingalls over here, out of frame. We shove this Ingalls north, by the way, at least we think, although that's debatable. Shouldn't even, let's get rid of that. We don't really know the cardinal directions. But we are clearly shoving this serpentinite, which is part of an ophiolite, which is also part of the ocean floor. Now we're actually talking about the floor, the ocean floor, the subfloor. An ophiolite sequence is part of the actual basaltic bedrock that then gets converted to metamorphic rock. I'm hyperventilating at the moment. Not really, but I'm kind of out of breath. Probably screaming too, even though I told myself not to scream. What am I leading to? I'm leading to some pink chalk. Huh? I'm leading to some pink chalk because what happens 96 million years ago? What happens 96 million years ago to this picture? We invade the picture from below, and we're going to make a pluton. Hot magma coming from below. Oh, I'm screwing up the picture. That's okay. That's okay. This is the Mount Stewart batholith. The Mount Stewart Pluton, which is younger than everybody else. And what date do we have now to tell us when that magma first invaded our picture from below? 96, that's the answer. 96 to 91 million years ago is the age of the Mount Stewart Pluton. So what's Baja BC? Our guest, Linda Noson, who we're going to visit with from Missoula, Montana in just a few moments, in the early 1970s, was drilling into this Mount Stewart Pluton at various locations. We'll hear some stories from her. But she was realizing, along with her advisor at the time, Dr. Merle Beck from Western Washington University, who is watching right now, but is in his late 80s. And I tried to get Merle to get on camera with us, and then he just wasn't comfortable with that, and his eyesight is not good. Merle, I hope you're okay, I'm sharing this. And then I said, well, Merle, how about if you just get somebody to get you in the live chat? They could type for you or whatever. He said, I can't do that. I just want to enjoy the programs. So Merle, I hope you enjoy these programs. Ideally, we would have had you with Linda in this show, but it's the long career of Merle Beck. 50 years ago was the first paper, and that's what we're celebrating here today, the 50th anniversary of the first paper to say that the paleomagnetic signature in this Mount Stewart Pluton, which started to form and solidify into granite 96 million years ago, has an indication that that stuff did not form in Washington. That magma did not turn from liquid into solid in Washington. In fact, Baja BC says this Pluton invaded into crust down in Baja, Mexico. And after it turned hard and cold, then it got moved almost 2,000 miles to the north. That's what Baja BC is. In this case, it's some Baja Mexican granite that's now in Washington. But there's a lot more of the batholithic material that was in Baja that's now north of Washington, and it's in British Columbia. But my new piece of information for some of you is that, and really for me, starting about 2 years ago, is I was realizing, wait a minute, it's not just Mount Stewart that was in Mexico. Because as I just showed you, if the Chihuahua and the serpentinite and the windy path thrust were then invaded by the Mexican granite, then that means all these guys were in Mexico. It's not just Mount Stewart granite. It's all three of these guys, which are now in central Washington. And then you go, well, wait a minute, it's more than that. Maybe it's much of the North Cascades back in this vintage that was in Mexico. And then you go, maybe much of the coast belt in British Columbia. Suddenly, we're talking about the concept called Baja BC. So it starts locally, and that's the power of this, that I can take a hike, and we're going to go to my laptop right now. I can look at some photos from Backcountry Gary or a new backcountry correspondent, Backcountry Lindsay, and we can look at their photos, and if the vintage is right, we can think of the potential of that bedrock originally being in Mexico. Let's go to it. Big moment. I'm switching cameras. Slides and face. There you are. And here is nickzentner.com. Still not secure. If you type in nickzentner.com, you get to my website. It looks like this. Please notice that I still have all the papers from our Eocene series. They're all PDFs. Look at those. I went crazy. I had a dozen of them just for the Rocky Mountain show. Go back. 350. Okay, skip it. I've got all these papers waiting for you. But the point is, in the extreme upper right-hand corner, that says Baja. So to get to these papers this winter that we are highlighting, you go to nickzentner.com and you click, like right now I'm going to do it, Baja. And that gets us to a list of papers. And the papers, come on, man. I can't enlarge it right now for some reason. Why not? Oh, screw it. So there's two papers waiting for you. The paper that was published in 1972, which is basically 1 page long, a page and a half long. Come on, enlarge. Thank you. Whoa! And can you read? Merle Beck, Jr. and Linda Noson. Western Washington State College, not even a university then, submitted to the journal November 1st of 1971, published in 1972. We're celebrating the 50th anniversary of this original Baja BC paper, not even termed Baja BC then, by the way. But the other thing I want to show you is that I tested the technology with Linda. Let me go back to the other camera. I tested the technology with Linda, who I met for the first time last week, and we were just testing things out and kind of getting comfortable. And she said, I've been looking for my thesis, my master's thesis. I've got it somewhere. I just can't find it. And I said, well, maybe I can use our library staff here who's excellent, and they can communicate with Western, and maybe they can find your thesis that you're not sure that you still have. And so we have it. Thanks to Maureen Rust at Central's Library and Aaron Bledsoe, who now works up at the Western Washington Library. And here is a paleomagnetic study of 3 granite plutons exposed in the Cascade Mountains of Washington, the entire thesis by Linda Jean Noson, who is our guest today. So, old school stuff here, and we will be referring to this thesis a little bit, but Linda's, go back. Linda's trepidation about joining us today was like, I don't remember, this is 50 years ago. You expect me to like defend my statements on page 32? Of course not. Of course not. We just want a little context, a little personal context behind the writing of that thesis, the master's thesis, and also her work with Merle Beck and the publication of that brief paper in 1972. Before we go to Linda, I have one more thing, and that is back to the laptop. I want to make sure that you remember how beautiful Merle Beck is. Nice save. So I don't know if you've seen, there are 2 interviews that I've done with Merle Beck, who cannot be with us live, but there's 2 full interviews with him. This is the first one I did in 2020. I did another one last summer, or earlier this summer, I should say. But then you should also remember that we have these gorgeous photographs from the North Cascades. Many of these rock units are part of the Baja BC discussion. So there's always an application of our discussions this winter to these places like, you guessed it, that's Mount Stewart. That's the Mexican granitic rock. Yes, I was talking about it in my backyard. Yes, Mount Stewart is a local landmark that everybody knows. So this is an easy topic to discuss locally, but we have people from all over the world. Can I convince you that this discussion of Baja BC is interesting? I hope so. A reminder, here's the North Cascades research team that I continue to work with. And to be honest, I'm not sure where they are on this scale of believing totally in Baja BC or being totally against it or somewhere in between. We will discuss as we go. But the Baja BC discussion, from my point of view this winter, will be focused in the Northern Washington North Cascades. And we will regularly be featuring photos by Gary Paul, Backcountry Gary. Notice what he is standing on here from this photo from the 1970s. Hell, Gary, this might be a 50-year-old photo. He's standing on the Chewaucam Schist. which was originally deep ocean mud. And here's Gary from a photo just taken this past summer. There's the Chewacam in the trees. There's the Ingalls. There's the thrust fault in between, and the Mount Stewart Pluton coming up from below. Another shot in the foreground of the Chewacam schist. Again, to almost every backcountry hiker is like, whatever, yeah, there's rock in the mountains. We all know that. But how many people realize the incredible drama and controversy that surrounds these bedrock units? Not many. The serpentinite is the ocean floor itself. The serpentinite is the ocean floor itself. And a new backcountry correspondent, Lindsay, has been very active in putting beautiful maps together on multi-night backcountry hikes that she has done most recently, in part inspired by what we're doing here. And so this is the first taste of some of the work by Lindsay Malone, who also has done some great work to help me and hopefully help you as well. Liz and I were up in the Stewarts a number of times this past summer, including up on Asgard Pass, no big deal. And that granite right there is our topic, not only today, but for weeks to come. Okay, I think that's enough. And Linda, I'm ready to come to you. I'm just giving you a warning. We're coming to you. I'm going to go back to the wide camera. Let me pause just to make sure that I feel like I am where I want to be. A couple final quick notes. So here is the paper that we're talking about that also waits for you at the website, and including kind of a rather rudimentary map of the collecting locations for Linda back 50 years ago, and from a Bob Miller paper and Scott Patterson paper. Oh, this is dumb. Forget it. I've been screwing around with those locations for a while. Last thing, let me just read some phrases from this 1972 paper that we are highlighting by Linda Noson and Merle Beck, and that will lead us into our discussion with Linda. No context now, just phrases. We'll see how many of these work for your brain. Large northward translation. Northward migration. Low paleomagnetic inclinations of batholithic rocks. Magnetic axial dipole. Moving bedrock 25 degrees north latitude. In other words, evidence of the paleomagnetic work in the Mount Stewart granite to say that originally that granite was at the latitude of 22 degrees north and getting it up to its present 47 degrees north. So that's 25 degrees of northward movement. Do I have it written down somewhere? I do. Can I find it? Hang on, Linda. Hang on, Patrick. If you go from 22 degrees north to 47 degrees north, that's what we're talking about, between 85 and 55 million years ago, that's it's 69 miles per 1 degree of latitude. So if we're going 25 degrees of latitude with 69 miles per degree, that's where we get these numbers of 1,725 miles of northern transport. Now, is that even possible? Is that as crazy as it sounds? We don't have to answer all that today, but we can visit with the person who was there at the very basic first levels. I don't know about basic, but the early days of making these discoveries. So, putting my headphones on, Big Lappy, making sure that my headphones are connected to Melon. They are. And let's go to Missoula, Montana, and welcome Linda Noson.
Hello.
Linda, how are you today? Hey, great to see you.
Thank you.
How's the weather? How's the weather there today?
Pretty cold. We've had a rather sudden advent of winter here. It was totally bare, and I walked outside, and there were 6 inches of snow. So.
Oh, 6. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're doing okay here. I can hear you just fine. You were real loud at the beginning, but I've lowered your volume a little bit, so I think we're doing great, and your video is wonderful as well. So let's just jump right in if you don't mind. Thank you again for being up for this.
Only because Merle asked.
Well, yes. Merle's the guy said, I'm just not up to it. But how about you ask Linda? And that's how we got to you.
Yeah.
How far back do you go with Merle? How did you first meet him?
I met him at University of California, Riverside. I was an undergraduate student. He was a graduate student. And then he left to go to Western and encouraged me to apply, which I did. And at the time I was at UC, I was actually in the vertebrate paleo lab. I was also interested in geochemistry, and then took one of Merle's courses and got excited about what he was doing and switched over to that. So kind of eclectic and not focused.
Yeah, he must have been convincing to get you to move up to Washington. You hadn't been up here before, I assume.
No, hadn't been. Yeah. But it's a great location, and I like to hike, and so yeah, it was a good move.
So can you set the stage for us? Like, you show up in Bellingham. What year was it, and did you know exactly what you were getting yourself into?
No, it was 1969, and at the time I first came up there, I wasn't really in paleomagnetics, so that came later. Had some wonderful geomorphology classes and different, got interested in tectonics. And I was interested in that actually at UC. I did take a geomorphology, advanced geomorphology classes, and those were some, you can look at geography from sort of a tectonic standpoint. Right. And also, I think one of the things that's just interesting to me in the context of doing plate tectonics is at the time that I was at Riverside, we were really just transitioning out of fixist geology. And so people didn't want to move anything other than up and down. And so it was, and I mentioned to you about some of the Russians that were actually executed because, and I looked up the quote, one was executed out of sabotaging geological exploration. And that's because he was identifying thrusts and naps in the Urals, and those demonstrated lateral movement. And so that contradicted their beliefs at the time. So he wasn't the only one. There were a number of them shot, and some of them were sent to camps. So, I mean, it was a time when people, you talk about Baja BC, people getting excited. Well, they don't get that excited.
Holy God. I got to read more about that. That is, I don't even know how to react to that. That's just so bizarre to me. But so at least, so do you have memories as an undergraduate at Riverside of taking classes from a very classic fixist type person, which means that they don't want any kind of plate tectonic movement whatsoever?
No, I don't. The kind of classes would be like the structural classes, and which we talked about continental drift. I mean, that goes back to 1912 with Zentner. And so continental drift was certainly being discussed. It was being dismissed by geophysicists because there wasn't, in their eyes, a good mechanism for plowing a pluton or anything else up in the way that the outlines of the coastline suggested. But when they started looking at having the asthenosphere as an area where things could slide as a thick plate rather than individual units, then that's when more or less started to become more accepted. Trying to think of any of the other things, but anyway, so continental drift was definitely out there. It just wasn't accepted until you started looking at like Vine and Matthews' paper in 1963.
Sure. Well, of course, it was a heady time. There were all these things changing, not only the plate tectonic thing, but I don't know how much you want to go into this, but females in the world of science, and that was changing as well. This is the same time that Tanya Atwater is writing these papers as well. Were you the only woman in some of your geology classes?
Or
very few of you?
I mean, in the department, I think there was 4 or 5 women, and there were a couple graduate students. The thing that I found really memorable from that time period, because it was pre-Title IX, I did an interview for a job with Humboldt Oil for a summer job. And the questions they asked me were, would my mother complain? Would my boyfriend complain? They had some others. And I asked them how many women they had working for them, because they just explained how they had thousands of people working for them. And they looked at each other and said, well, I think there's 2 in the lab in Denver. Oh. And then the other thing that they said, well, you know, the real problem, when I told them I really don't think my mother would care at all about this, they said, well, the real problem is the wives complain. So that takes that out of my hands. So it was a different time period, for sure.
It was different for sure. And obviously, I hope it's obvious to most everybody watching, it's an unrecognizable time now as far as what we're talking about. Like, this is, if we're looking for good things, this is a good thing. That's just, it's so different now.
At University of Washington, I think about half of the undergraduate students are women. So it has changed a lot. I was at the University of British Columbia for a while, and there was a woman whose father owned a silver mine, and she'd grown up working in the mine. And she had applied for a job, and it was at a time when they were insisting on accepting women, and she didn't get it. The woman who got it had no background or experience. And that was a way that they could then fire her for not being able to do the job.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, yes, I'm sure you've got a different time for sure. So Merle was somehow different. He saw your talent. He wanted you. Was it just the one class that you had from him to convince him to like want you up working with him up here in Washington?
I didn't have a class from him. We were just friends, and he thought it was a good place to go. I mean, I did not have any unrecognizable talent by any means. Wow. And there was some other places to go, but Western was a good choice.
Well, if you can paint a picture for us, if you wouldn't mind, and viewers, we're going to give you a chance to ask Linda some questions. She seems up for that. I hope you continue to feel that way. But so you hit town, you hit Bellingham in 1969. Is it immediately the following summer that you're out collecting data with a paleomagnetic drill?
Yeah, it must have been, because I think I left the university around 71. So it would have been in that time frame. I really am not real clear on dates and times.
No. But it was a 2-year time. You're pretty clear. It was just a 2-year time window. Well, okay. I mean, that work, we're still talking about that works 50 years later. So I'd like to hear more about it. Like, so Merle was just starting to build some kind of lab. I don't even really know what's in a paleomag lab, but were you helping him build or collect these instruments or something?
Building it, but he had ordered a new magnetometer. That was the first time they'd ordered a magnetometer. And the thing I remember about that was that I think it was like $10,000, and it needed to be, it said something about shimming it with a matchbook cover or something. And I thought, what? Why aren't there like specialized shims? Or, I mean, it was, that part was a little funny. But yeah, so he was just building his lab, and he mentioned in one of his talks about some other people that really helped him create that and get a lot of instrumentation. So,
and do you remember? Go ahead, please.
Well, the only other equipment that I remember, not always fondly, was the McCullough chainsaw that we used to drill the cores. And so those were the two main pieces that I think of that time.
Do you remember how you selected your sites to drill? Was it just simply easy access next to Highway 2 or something, or was it more involved than that?
Merle must have really selected them. A lot of it had to do with age-dated sites and easy access. Most of them were, road cuts or something that you could get to easily. So, yeah, and getting them dispersed over the area. We did, yeah.
Well, if I kind of decipher your maps from your thesis as well as that short paper, it seemed like you were in the Icicle Canyon maybe for one or two of the cores, and maybe in the Tumwater Canyon along near Leavenworth for one, and up at Stevens Pass maybe, and then possibly even on the west side over by the Beckler Peak stock. Does that ring a bell at all?
Yeah, Beckler Peak
Okay.
and Index. Seem to remember drilling at Skycomish one time.
So what was the context then? So did Merle anticipate that you were going to have these unusual directions in those cores, or were you the guy to break the news to him like, hey, something's going on here?
Well, my understanding of what my thesis focus was to just confirm the polar wandering curve for North America for the Cretaceous. So having age-dated sites in North America, compare them to other age-dated sites of the same age in other areas of North America, and they should have a concurrent reference pool. And I just didn't get that kind of data. And I didn't realize at the time just how aberrant that was. Well, I guess I did, because we'd had Vine and Matthews and we'd had some other things. So yeah, it didn't look to me like it looked wrong. And so I did bring it to him. But I had actually realized he'd already done some work in Southern California on rotations. I wasn't familiar with that at the time.
Oh, watching the interview with him on YouTube kind of gave you some background on that?
That's didn't know you already had done that.
That's kind of cool. And so the Mount Stewart signatures paleomagnetically were the oddballs, but then you went also to the Grotto, and I forget the other one right now.
Well, Index. We drilled at Index, but the magnetism was not stable. It just kept kind of flipping around. We could never really get it cleaned up to where we felt like we're at the right level. So,
and so those were more, so that one was odd, but then the Grotto seemed like maybe there was a good direction there, but just not funky. It was well behaved, quote unquote.
Well, I'm sorry, I can't really remember Grotto that much. I'm Index.
Okay.
But Grotto, there was the Grotto is that the younger one?
That's kind of what I'm getting at. That
the Grotto was that was comparable, I think, in age to the Snoqualmie. Merle, anytime you want to chip in, to the Snoqualmie batholith, and those were consistent with current where they should be. So
where they should be.
So the Mount Stewart was an aberrant, but the other was not. So.
Well, I'm very weak on paleomag. That's obviously one of my goals this winter is to spend a few of these shows trying to learn some basics. But I think for me, and I think the viewers as well, just constantly going between Cretaceous bathylitic rocks in the North Cascades, which have the wrong paleomag signature, going right next door to these two young Cascade magmas, and we're fine. And then also, if we're back in the Cretaceous, but we're back in Quebec or something, like in one of those papers, like that's also well behaved, or as you mentioned, all kind of working with the
references.
Yes, right. So fascinating. So I guess last comment about your days with Merle. So was it a quick write-up, or was it in other words, putting the thesis together or putting that paper that we're really trying to highlight in 1972, was that, do you remember like, oh, this is going to like, nobody's going to like this? Or was there drama behind that? Okay.
Merle wrote the paper. But even from my thesis, looking at this thing is way out of place, I just thought it was interesting. I had no idea that it would be something that people took great umbrance with. But
well,
I think in my thesis, it actually says it could be either 30 degrees uplift of the whole area around the batholith consistently over all these dispersed air sites. That is an option. It just didn't seem like a very reasonable option. Right. But then the other is perhaps for some not reasonable. And it's not that the position was wrong. It just was aberrant for other areas at that time period in North America. I mean, it just didn't fit, I guess is a better way to say it. So. Well,
fascinating. And sometimes it does feel like you're doing something, it feels like a small project. You're then like, we can finish your story right now, I guess, like you leave Bellingham and there's no more paleomag work from you. Is that correct?
That's true. I went up to University of British Columbia, but I got married. I went up there and because my husband was doing some physics, PhD in physics there. And the program didn't have any paleomag, and I just didn't stay with it. But then we went down to University of Washington, and I was in the geophysics program. I was accepted to a PhD there, but June of that year, I discovered I was pregnant, and which was a little stunning because at the time I was on 2 different forms of birth control. So it was like, that's weird. But I decided to go ahead and start the program, but I only stayed for 1 semester and dropped out to have the baby. Mm-hmm. And then in 77, so she was born in 75, unplanned but wanted. So in 77, I got a job in the University of Washington seismic lab in the geophysics program. And I worked there for 11 years. I was Washington State seismologist. My initial work was on compiling earthquake locations and publishing catalogs at the Washington State Geologic Survey. And then Mount St. Helens came, and that spring, my job, we just started an automatic P-picker, automatic earthquake locations, because before they were done using photographic records, seismic records. And so I was comparing the locations between the 2 systems to see how well they were coordinated. And then I located the first earthquake on Mount St. Helens, a 4.2. And that we were discussing just, that's interesting. So then we went back and reviewed all the developed quarter records, trying to see if there were smaller events before that. But I like earthquakes also give you some, information on tectonics. So I enjoyed that quite a bit.
Wow, I'm so impressed. You didn't even miss a beat. You just went on in another direction and mastered that too, it sounds like.
Well, didn't master it. I come in from a tectonic or geology or sort of growth. I'm not a physicist. So I can stumble through some of that, but yeah, I did some intensity mapping on the Straight Creek Fault that was northwest southeast of Mount St. Helens. We collected something like 4,000 different responses that we chugged through and plotted that. We had a woman in the area who was sure she was feeling earthquakes, and we put seismometers at her place and went down to talk to her, and she said, because we couldn't find anything. And she said, and she had a friend over at the time who'd been in the area a while. She said, well, we just kept hearing this, what? And we looked at her and went, grouse. Because it's when their wings, hit behind. Yeah. So we tried to track those. So
Oh,
that
that's all right.
was an interesting time. And I did
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot at the legislature during that time. We got a seismic safety committee council established for the state to come up with recommendations. And I worked with FEMA when I was at university doing earthquake safety programs for schools. So,
Oh my. Well, you've been you retired officially a handful of years ago or more than that?
2015.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And it's been delightful.
Oh, I'll bet so. Well, I'm just curious before we go to the live questions. You must have just kind of vaguely kept up on maybe Merle and Baja BC, or occasionally would hear about somebody talking about this, and you're like, wow, are they actually talking about what Merle and I were doing 50 years ago?
I've run into it a couple times. I was doing a presentation on Washington State earthquake hazards at University of Victoria one time, and a guy came up to me afterwards and said, "Are you the Noson of Beck and Noson?" And he wanted to talk about the paper. And I was kind of like, oh my gosh, that's still out there. And just a few things like that. But I was really very involved with building codes, ground motions. I was at a Penrose down at Seaside in 2000, where we were talking about the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake. And I was involved in helping with developing the scenario for that for USGS. So, and I kind of thought about, the paleomag and some of the geology stuff that he did. It was sort of like history, and earthquakes are kind of like journalism.
Yeah.
They're sort of clear and present in your face. So
I like that.
I enjoyed that. And then after the university, I worked as a natural hazard specialist for Region 10 for FEMA, and oversaw the earthquake programs for the Region 10 states.
Amazing. Wow, you really have had quite a career. Very impressive. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to go to the live viewers now. And if you're new to us, viewers, it's easiest if you have a question for Linda to hit your caps lock so that it's uppercase letters for me. And we'll just do this you got a couple more minutes, Linda, before we sign off?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay,
I'm
good.
just sitting here thinking, will they take my master's away from me if I can't answer the question?
No, of course not. No, so Saber says, where was Baja 80 million years ago compared to today? I mean, we're going to get into it, Saber. It was a 22 degrees north. Does that sound familiar to you, Linda, from your work?
Yeah. It was south.
It was south.
And perhaps on the edge perhaps on the edge of the Farallon Plate as it moved north. That's one possibility.
Well, that's I've been chicken to get into the ocean plates because it feels like there's so many variables there. But if you were talking about the Kula, if you remember talking, I think it was your master's, I think, right?
Yeah.
The Kula was discussed a fair amount. Yeah.
Yeah. Doesn't Kula mean all gone or something? Because it's actually all gone underneath the Aleutians.
Very good.
It's a kind of project to have. No one could ever check up on you.
Yeah, that's right. Perfect. BC Outdoorsman. Hi, Linda. Have you ever drilled or explored any bedrock on Vancouver Island, like the Sicker Group or something like that? Or was your project only there with the Stuart Pluton?
Mine was only with the Stuart Pluton, but if you listen to Merle's, one of the other talks that Merle gave to you that you have on your program, he talks about the work that Ted Irving has done in Vancouver Island, and he also found some similar displacements. So, and he's kind of the father of paleomagnetism.
Yes. Did you ever deal with Ted Irving at all during your 2 years there?
I met him.
Yeah.
And we used his book.
Oh, you did? Yeah. Well, I managed to get a copy myself back like 1964. Does that sound about right? Like that old textbook. I'm going to try to just go through that really carefully. I think that
Old
might be
textbook.
helpful.
Thanks, Nick.
Well, there have been a couple paleomag textbooks more recently, and I think it was Merle that said, yeah, I think you should get a copy of Ted's, and he's got a little bit more practical approach to explaining some of this for somebody like me. Chris, what was the estimated depth of solidification of the drilled sites? Did you have any sense of where that granite was originally when it cooled? Probably not.
I didn't, but also in the when you were interviewing, because some things have come out since I did that. There's been a lot, well, in 50 years, there's been a lot of work done since we did that.
Yeah.
And I believe Merle was talking about some bathymetric data that was done that was able to look at the depth. I don't remember what that depth was. Do you happen to remember that, Nick?
I don't. I think it was relatively shallow, but that's kind of a meaningless statement. Let's keep it moving. Mark from the UK wonders, what minerals did you use to read the magnetic history from your batholiths?
Hematite.
Hematite.
Magnetite, hematite.
Can you describe what you remember about that lab work? You were hands-on in there. You were putting your little cores into this magic machine.
The cores are oriented in the field. When you drill, there's a cylindrical piece that goes into the rock, and that is oriented in north X, Y, and Z axis, and then that's put into the magnetometer to get rid of any kind of noise and external magnetism to get down to a steady state for what it was. And I think Merle also had mentioned in that previous talk about the Curie point, that at above 650 degrees, these things aren't necessarily oriented, and they orient to the magnetic pole as it goes below the Curie point. And so that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, well, that's
vague on it.
Oh, I am too. I mean, I'm looking forward to making some progress on that, but boy, my eyes glaze over in a hurry sometimes with some of that. It's such, petrology is part of this, and I'm so weak on the petrology part of it that I really struggle. Robert asks, was your geomagnetic evidence a total surprise? And let me add to that, do you remember Merle or you kind of going, this can't be right, we got to go drill again or run the sample again or something like that?
No, I think we felt very confident in the directions that we achieved, but I was surprised that they weren't what I was expecting as something that was I thought going to be just a pretty straightforward confirm the polar wandering curve for North America. So I was surprised to see the direction, but they were good, solid directions. So not surprised in that sense.
Well, he has commented more than once, Merle has, about the strength of the directions, or such a beautiful direction with that Stewart Pluton, almost better than any other Pluton. That's the impression I get. And maybe you remember that as well, that there was just a really strong, easy to read signal.
There was, and it was also because the index was such a rotten signal. You could see what a really bad one was. It just never settled to anything useful. So it was in the grotto the same way.
You're doing great. How about just a few more? Will asks, how deep into the rock surface did you have to drill, Linda, to obtain a proper sample? How far into are you using that drill?
The drill only went in maybe 4 inches or so. I mean, it's not a long core that, if I remember correctly. I mean, we're not doing real penetrative. It's just a chainsaw that has a little adaptive nozzle on it to core into the rock. So.
And then you somehow slide a button in there before you pull the drill out to somehow label your.
The drill can come out, but it's still, the back of the sample is still attached. And so then you can slip in something to read the directions and then break it out.
I see.
And I'm now sitting and going, how do we break it out?
Yeah, how did you? Okay, I'm pushing it now with you a little bit, Linda, but we'll try this. Like, were there a bunch of magnetic reversals close to the time of the age of the Stuart Pluton? Or am I right that, without knowing much, that Cretaceous time is just such a weird time in the history of magnetic polarity flips, that it's a real steady reverse?
Yeah, I
or
don't
normal?
remember reversals or discuss, certainly the offshore, when Vine and Matthews did their work on the ridges, there you saw reversals, which is how they estimated speed of the plate and stuff, direction.
Okay, well, you're a great sport. How about one more? We've got two people asking about the weather. Do you remember any weather stories, like you were struggling with the drill and it's 120 degrees, whatever? I
went up by myself once, which was probably a mistake, and it poured rain and the drill overheated and I didn't get the sample. And yeah, I remember kind of sitting by the side of the road all wet with this drill, but most of the time it was pretty straightforward.
And who were you with normally when you were out drilling?
Merle.
It was Merle. Just the two of you guys. Okay.
I assume, yeah.
Yeah, long time ago.
Yeah.
How about one more? Like your days as a grad student at Western, was it an exciting time? Was Merle teaching a bunch of classes that were like almost like mind blowing, like some of these classes where this whole world is opening up to you?
I just see them as where there are classes where we're learning, not doing something. At least I didn't feel like we were, blowing up the world. We were learning about the rocks and learning how to take samples. And I took a waves course when I was there. In fact, that's where I met my husband. He was interested in acoustics. He was interested in waves in the air, and I was interested in waves in the ground. And he's actually now an acoustical consultant. Well, he's retired now, but he's designed concert halls. But so can use your background in all kinds of ways.
Right.
So
right.
Yeah.
Well, there was a lot going on, just in these geology departments. I personally, my first geology class was in the early 1980s, and I still remember the first day the guy stood up and said, well, you guys have missed all the excitement, back. And I was like bummed out, he didn't mean to bum me out, but I was like, God dang, I wish I was around in the late 60s. That must have been a great time.
I was thinking of coursework, but I mean, the atmosphere around those times was exciting because things were changing. There was new information coming out. It was a really interesting time, going from continental drift to plate tectonics, to accreted terrains, which really the terrain name didn't come in until I think after I left. Yeah. One of my guitars just fell over.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, that's maybe our cue. You know the old saying, Linda, when the guitar falls, that's time to stop a live stream.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and I hope it wasn't too painful for you, and maybe we'll keep in touch with some of this stuff.
Okay. Well, I'll listen in because I'd like to learn some more. Okay.
That's great. That's wonderful. Okay. Well, have a good night. Thanks again for your help. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Linda Noson. Here's to Linda Noson for her time today. It was Merle's suggestion to invite her. I emailed her maybe a month ago, and she said, no, thanks. I don't think I can do that. And we made progress in saying, this will be okay. So extra thanks to her for overcoming her trepidation to get into this. And I think she might start watching some of these live streams and we'll be able to see how warm and welcoming you guys are. So I really enjoyed that. I hope you did too. Not too bad on time here. We're 10 minutes after 3, and I'd like to just say a couple final words before we sign off here today. First of all, I want to make sure that you know that this is an ongoing series that we are just starting now. And session B, well, first of all, in case you haven't gotten the memo, all winter we're using the same format we did last winter. Wednesday afternoons at 2 p.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Pacific on Saturday mornings. That's our regular routine. We are not meeting here because in the States here we have a holiday called Thanksgiving. And so Liz and I will be out of town starting on the 24th. But we will have a guest the night before Thanksgiving. At our usual time, a week from today. So the next time I will be seeing you will be this coming Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific. And I'll be the only person in the building. Just for context, this is a very, very busy week in this building. Everybody's taking midterm exams. I've got classes going on in here. There's students going back and forth, and they're all waving as they go by because they can see in the room here. But the quarter will be slowly kind of wrapping up. And so many of these many of these sessions will be just me in the entire building empty, which was the case the last couple of years, of course. But it's different now, and I'm happy to report that this building is full of life. For those that are particularly excited about this place and you're thinking about visiting the building, I would ask that you not come join me in the room here during these sessions. But if you wanted to visit, if you wanted to just visit out in the hallway on a Wednesday afternoon, a little bit after this, that'd be great. You remember you need to park off campus on 7th. There's a video on my YouTube channel called Walking to CW Geology or something like that. So during the school hour, it's kind of tough to park on a campus and walk. But if you can walk a few blocks, I'd be fun to visit with you, especially when the quarter's over, which will be right after Thanksgiving, and it'll be just a ghost town around here. Okay, a couple final comments. Thanks to Kay in Seattle for providing this gift. She got this idea for a personalized license plate when she heard Bob Miller 2 summers ago on a video talking about Paul Umhofer. And Paul Umhofer, who was an important geologist studying Baja BC type research, had a personalized license plate, Baja BC, down in Arizona. Paul Umhofer was a longtime geology professor in Flagstaff at Northern Arizona University. So Kay kind of heard about that and then made this, it's not a real license plate, but this gift. And tragically, Paul died unexpectedly about a year ago. And so we're all distraught about that. Still, I only met Paul once, but he was a big part of the lives of many that you know through these field videos. Close collaborator with Bob Miller, advisor to Aaron Donaghy and others. So Paul, we miss you and wish you could have been part of this series. Just wasn't meant to be. In fact, he grew up in a small town in Wisconsin, just a couple towns over from where I grew up in southern Wisconsin. So didn't get a chance to get into that with Paul. The Washington Geological Survey continues to have these very attractive posters. They're free and available. If you go to the Washington Geological Survey website, I'm sure you'll be able to find these. The last time I promoted these, I think they were sending them around the world, if I heard correctly. But I guess I'll leave it to you to figure out how to contact them. I don't have that handy. And for longtime viewers, you remember some friends here. Here's old Mappy McMap that we'll use on occasion. The fruitcake, and it's all his or her glory. And this more detailed version of the North Cascades, which I've been bringing out to the field as well as from our time together. So there's a combination of old familiar props and other things and, things that you remember from a couple of years ago, combined with some new guests and some new content. And we can't get away from the content. That's the whole point of this. The whole point is not to get too cutesy, but to get into the detail of these science papers. And the twist that I'm offering here is we get a chance to meet many of these people. To me, that just brings a whole new level of excitement. And we're more, I'm just speaking for myself, but maybe for you too, as we get to know these people like Linda and Basil and Jerome and others and Aaron Donaghy. It's more than just words on a page. Now it's a person. We can hear their voice as we're reading their paper. And it's just an additional layer of enjoyment as we learn new things together. And so, a toast to you. That's not going away. Here's to you for joining us live for our first live stream of the Baja BC A to Z live stream series. Here's to you, Sunheit. Here's to your health, your physical and mental health. I know we're kind of over the pandemic, but isn't that still applicable regardless of what's going on globally? We're taking care of our bodies. We're taking care of our spiritual needs. What? Here's to you. Spiritual needs. What the hell do I know about that? Here's to the health of your family and your friends and everyone in your community, big and small. Will we get into the ribbon candy again this winter? Will we get into the kosher salt? Will we get into the... These are all, I guess, inside jokes. They're not meant to be exclusive or keeping those of you that don't know what I'm talking about away. That's not the intention. But some of those corny little teaching tricks will continue. And as a teaser for the next show, I had a brainstorm this morning over my oatmeal at the breakfast table. Accordion symbol. Can you guess how I might use those two musical instruments? If you can call symbols musical instruments. Until next time, Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific, I say thank you, I love you, and goodbye from Ellensburg, Washington, USA. End stream.